Okay, nothing more to say other than to introduce our first speaker, and that is Dr. Heward Wilkinson, who is a psychotherapist with a literary background, and being a master of these two disciplines enables him to perceive the text within a text. And he will be combining these skills to reveal a new perception of the relationship of Jane Austen to the Shakespeare authorship question. So thank you very much. Over to you, Heward.
Thanks very much, Alexander. Rather awe-inspiring introduction. Whether I can live up to it, I don't know. But anyway, here we are. I'm going to begin by slightly cheating, drawing in one of the descendants of the honourable clan of the Cecils, about whom Stephanie Hughes and Bonner Cutting have been talking so much or writing so much recently, and that is Lord David Cecil. And he offers us a perception which is absolutely at the other end of the polarities from the one which I am going to offer you. And Nietzsche said how much he enjoyed his antipodes, the people who are opposite to him. And this is an example. Lord David Cecil, in the introduction, or rather the foreword to the manuscript chapters of Persuasion, which is a very useful volume, says Jane Austen seems not to have taken either her works or herself over seriously. Certainly, she showed no signs that they would be of interest to posterity. So we have there the model, which is about the inspired author, the child of nature, writing very much as the birds sing in spring, not that I'm against the birds singing in spring, and that there's no great labor of love, passion, exploration, uncertainty, and so on and so forth that has gone into those works. We're familiar with that in the context of Shakespeare, of course, and I'm going to explore the other polarity, and I will do so by beginning by drawing on a very great critic of the 20th century, Lionel Trilling. But first, before I do that, can I just say that the various people that I've most drawn upon, there is on my website, hewardwilkinson.co.uk/writings, at the top of where it says selection of papers, you will be able to see the texts and the links of those that I have particularly drawn on. I want to mention now a man called Arne Perlstein. I'm much indebted to him. I'll come to that in a moment. I'm also indebted to a paper by Laura Monaghan White on Emma and the New Comedy. And I'm also indebted to a paper by Meera Sengupta Zaman on satanic persuasion in Jane Austen, because Jane Austen is a much darker author than we are wont to think. And so those are, you will find those and other connections on my website. And I will now turn to what Lionel Trilling has to say. There are 5 points that he indicates, which are very powerful and very wise. But some of that wisdom is inspired by the source of wisdom, Jane Austen, the mystery woman, and the link that I'm going to explore, of course, is between her and the authorship problem. And in the Lionel Trilling passages, he first of all says, I'll dwell on this a little. He first of all says that Jane Austen is an unfathomable, a very difficult author, in that Emma, which is the text that I'm going to be focusing upon, Emma is a very difficult novel, not in the sense that it is difficult in the sense it has a very intractable style or masses of background learning or so on and so forth, like Eliot or Proust or Kafka might be difficult, but that it is difficult because it constantly changes its form and shape. We never read the same novel again when we read Emma, and that's why it haunts and tantalizes and seduces us year in, year out. I have been reading it umpteen times for over 60 years, and I'm still finding new things, and this is part of what I have found. So that is the first thing. Now, how does she do that? She does it again, time and again, by cross-referencing. She will have two or more references which mutually support one another. They may be miles away from one another in the novel. And I'm just going to give one illustration, which is very significant, and that is that in the opening sentence of the novel, where it says Emma Woodhouse, handsome, clever and rich, with a comfortable home and a happy disposition, seemed to unite some of the best blessings of existence. And that lodges in our minds until it comes to the point where Emma is threatened in her love that she's just discovered for Mr. Knightley by Harriet Smith, who is a key figure in this whole discussion. And she is terrified that Harriet is going to marry Mr. Knightley, and that consequently, as his wife, she will give him all the best blessings of existence. In other words, celibacy is not one of those blessings. So there we have it. And Harriet Smith, in a way, was the way into this problem, because late on in the novel, where Emma and Mr. Knightley are betrothed, Mr. Knightley reports that Harriet, after all, has become engaged to the farmer and landowner Robert Martin. And Emma is secretly delighted, but she's excessively surprised. And Jane Austen labors this very much. Emma pretends that she doesn't understand what is going on. And she says to Mr. Knightley, it was not Harriet's hand that he was certain of, that's Robert Martin. It was the dimensions of some famous ox. And that lodged in my mind as a possible reference. I was just intrigued by the possibility to the authorship problem. And at the same time, one allusion to misquote Aristotle doesn't make an inference. And the inferences in Jane Austen come with those two or more cross references. But we will see that Harriet Smith, we are able to combine this reference with others. Okay, so coming on to the next step, I have to hurry through. The next step is that Emma represents a new kind of woman, not in the feminist sense, not in the anti-feminist sense, but simply, as Lionel Trilling says, that she exhibits it and manifests it in its own right. She is primal woman, as it were, highly intelligent, a very strong force of will, and she has no sense of inferiority at all. So that gives her a portentous force, which we will come to the implications of that in due course. The third thing, by the way, in the wisdom of Jane Austen, we may say with Falstaff that she's also the cause of wisdom in other people, but their insights are not as far-reaching as hers, as we shall see. And the third one is that this novel is about the person who is named in the title of the novel. And Lionel Trilling emphasizes that that is particularly important. Now, the fourth thing is, and this places us in a rather awkward situation, is that the title of Lionel Trilling's essay, at least in his book Beyond Culture, is Emma and the Legend of Jane Austen. And she is a legend. She's a national icon in England and also in America. And so much so that she is there on our banknotes, on our £10 notes at the present time, just as William Shakespeare of Stratford-on-Avon was on our £20 paper banknotes. So we have two icons and legends for the price of one. And that means that if we challenge one, as we do, we get a pretty strong kickback. We're likely to get an equally strong one if this ever gets out into the light of day and into a wider publicity. So that's the fourth element. The fifth element is the recognition that behind Emma sits the Shakespeare play As You Like It, which is an allegory, an allegorical work, and the dimension that I'm going to bring into play is also to say that Emma is not only a realistic novel and a romantic novel, the wonderful novel that it is, but is mainly treated, even by postmodern critics, as a realistic modern novel, which it is. But along with that, as Ted Hughes said of Shakespeare, and particularly of As You Like It, there is the allegorical or archetypal element, and this is very powerful in Jane Austen as well. And this is what I'm going to come on to. Okay, so now we go to As You Like It, and we go to the insight of the man I mentioned, Arnie Pearlstein, who, picking out from Jane Austen's remark about I do not write for such dull elves as have not much ingenuity themselves. He has a blog called the Sharp Elves blog, and he is a sleuth of the first water. I think he often finds things that don't actually exist, as many of us as sleuths do, but he also genuinely finds some things, and this one is a remarkable one. What he spotted was that in the passage in Emma, which is about the visit to Donwell Abbey, when Mrs. Elton is making preparations and talking to Mr. Knightley and trying to take over the whole management of the thing, which Mr. Knightley resists, she says, I see Jane every day. And that is in reference to Jane Fairfax. But it, of course, also is a reference to her own name. The name of the author is the novelist who is writing this book. And so that prepares us, that's a signal, it's a typical Jane Austen signal for what comes next. And this is what he spotted. I see Jane every day, says Mrs. Elton, but as you like, full stop, it is to be as you like it. There it is, planted in the text. Now there are references, the Shakespeare edition, the Hartfield edition of Shakespeare, to A Midsummer Night's Dream, The Course of True Love Never Did Run Smooth. The Shakespeare edition, the Hartfield edition of Shakespeare is, of course, the novel Emma, but the references to A Midsummer Night's Dream there are out in the open. Now, this one is hidden. So why is it hidden? What's she up to? What is our wonderful mystery woman up to with this extraordinary hidden reference, hidden in plain sight in the way we love, what's she up to? And why is she pointing us to As You Like It? Well, we find that she is aware what she's pursuing are the touchstone passages of As You Like It, which I will just very quickly remind you of. The first one, when a touchstone is with Audrey, they're both with Audrey, and the second one is with Audrey and William. And the recognition is that touchstone is with Audrey like Ovid is with the Goths. In other words, Ovid is in exile, a senior poet in exile, and it's parallel to the situation of touchstone. And of course, the elusiveness of the word touchstone has often been commented on. The second one, which is an even more powerful reference about the senior author, when a man's verses cannot be understood, nor a man's good wit seconded with the forward child understanding, it strikes a man more dead than a great reckoning in a little room. And that is an allusion to the death of Marlowe, supposedly at Deptford. And secondly, it is an allusion to the line in The Jew of Malta, infinite riches in a little room, which is possibly a blasphemous reference to the divinity of Jesus in the Virgin's womb in the medieval period, that reference. And we ask ourselves, what happens in Emma with the touchstone? Well, there's a reference to touchstone in volume 2, in a conversation between Emma and Mr. Knightley. And then secondly, there's a deliberate allusion again with the double thing of a reference to the little room. Emma and Frank Churchill are trying to find a big enough ballroom to run a dance, and Emma criticizes Randalls and says it would be a crowd in a little room. And Frank Churchill congratulates her on her turn of phrase. Now, of course, that turn of phrase comes from Shakespeare. This is not proven, but at the same time, we have to think to ourselves, Jane Austen is so incredibly sharp. How could she not have known? She knew As You Like It backwards. How could she not have known she was alluding to that passage? Okay, but now we come to the major one. And this again, she has always plausible deniability. And this one is emblazoned on the very first quotation on the De Vere Society front page of the website. It is the reference to Ipsy. You are not Ipsy, for I am he. So this is the passage. You do love this maid, says Touchstone to William, who's 25 at this point. I do, sir. Give me your hand. Art thou learned? No, sir. Then learn this of me. We all know this as Oxfordians. Learn this of me. To have is to have, for it is a figure in rhetoric. Drink being poured out of cup into a glass, the frontman hypothesis, by filling the one doth empty the other. For all your writers do consent that Ipsy is he. Now you are not Ipsy, for I am he. This I'll pause it there, this in Shakespeare is a reference to the divinity of the anthropos, the Renaissance man, the divinity of the Renaissance hand with which Hamlet is riddled, and which Alexander Waugh has talked on his recent post on YouTube. And also, this was very much around in the 18th century, and Karl Barth, the great Swiss-German theologian, wrote about it at great length in what was published as From Rousseau to Ritual, and Protestant theology in the 19th century. And he writes about people like Rousseau, Hegel, Lessing, Schleiermacher, Novalis. All of those people are in effect advocating the divinity of the human heart as a manifestation of the divine. And so that was in a quieter way around within the Anglican realm as well. And that was the heritage that Jane Austen had. And so we go on. Which he, sir? Oh, by the way, I need to mention also, I've forgotten, there are several more references in Shakespeare precisely to this kind of thing, and they connect up with Exodus 3:14, I am that I am, and there's one of those in Sonnet 121, there's one in a letter of Edward de Vere to Lord Burleigh, 1584, which is on Nina Green's website, and you can find it there. And also there is the fundamental reference, not only this one in As You Like It, but the fundamental one where poor Tom appears to King Lear, who goes mad, and King Lear says, his three honours are sophisticated, thou art the thing itself, again, thing itself, that is ipse, in the Latin. Okay. Which he, sir? He, sir, that must marry this woman. And then we have Emma's great epiphany when she realizes that her love, which she has just discovered for Mr. Knightley, is endangered by Harriet. Now, Harriet at this point is playing the part of the imposter. As Laura Moningham-White has pointed out, it's Emma, of course, who has been the trickster and the fool who's created Harriet in this position, but now it's got out of hand, and we have this. A few minutes were sufficient for making her acquainted with her own heart. A mind like hers, once opening to suspicion, made rapid progress. She touched, she admitted, she acknowledged the whole truth. Now, the whole truth is mentioned, this is my comment, which we'll come back to, is mentioned again and again in the I ams in John's Gospel. In particular, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And we will come back to that. That's planted there as a very powerful reference. Why was it so much worse that Harriet should be in love with Mr. Knightley than with Frank Churchill? Why was the evil so dreadfully increased by Harriet's having some hope of a return? It darted through her with the speed of an arrow that Mr. Knightley must marry no one but herself, ipse. He that must marry this woman must marry no one but herself. And she leaps straight from being in love with Mr. Knightley to marriage, although the being in love, here again, a double reference, darted through her, reference to Cupid, with the speed of an arrow, Cupid's arrow. Mr. Knightley must marry no one but herself. And that is the connection. Now, if you have followed the argument, it leads up through the references to As You Like It, and we have the answer to the question, why has Jane Austen planted that reference to As You Like It that Arnie Perlstein pointed out and discovered? And she wants to say something. She does not want to say it from the rooftops, but she wants it to be possible to find for sharp elves, those that are not dull elves, those that have much ingenuity. And I imagine she knows all about the posterity of Shakespeare. She knows about the double authorship problem. She's gone straight to the reference that Oxfordians will always make. And that is the inference. It's not absolutely proven, but again, remember, whatever we may have seen, Jane Austen will have seen. I now come quickly back to the name of Emma and the reference to the whole truth. In John's Gospel, if you look at the Hebrew translation, then you get something that confirms Mr. Weston's attempt to make Emma the study of perfection. What two letters mean perfection? M-A, Emma, he says on Box Hill. Well, the whole truth, I am the way and the truth and the life, the whole truth is in the Hebrew, emet. And that is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the final letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Now, if this is all accurate, then Harriet as the imposter also becomes the allegory of the Shakespeare authorship problem, and we can have the confirmation that our reference to the famous ox in the passage that I read out earlier on is now corroborated by the peculiar function which is central to the novel that Harriet plays, and when she resumes her ordinary position, and it might lead us to reflect in an ecumenical mode that if it had not been for the parallel situation of whatever was done through William of Stratford, we might not have had the works of Shakespeare at all, even though our own allegiances are undoubtedly going to be to the famous ox. But I leave it with you as you like it.